A samurai was on the verge of becoming the most powerful warrior in Japan when his lord made a fatal mistake that could destroy the entire clan. At that moment, he had to make a choice that would change his life forever. He could save his master and betray everything he believed in, or follow the code of loyalty and lose everything, including his own life. What he did that day was not just a personal decision. It was the application of the most brutal and absolute rule that ever existed in the history of warriors. A rule that allowed no exceptions, that accepted no excuses, and that transformed men into legends, or condemned them to eternal dishonor. Prepare to discover how a single invisible law controlled every breath, every thought, and every action of thousands of warriors for centuries. In the heart of feudal Japan, there was a force more powerful than any sharp katana, more resilient than any armor, and more feared than any army. This force was not physical. It was an idea so deeply rooted in the souls of the samurai that it determined the fate of entire families, provoked bloody wars, and created stories that resonate to this day. We are talking about absolute loyalty, a principle so radical that it made a man choose death not only for himself, but for his entire family, simply to honor the word given to his lord. When we think of samurai, we often imagine skilled warriors with swords, masters of combat and military strategy, but the truth is that a samurai's most powerful weapon was not made of steel. It was made of unwavering devotion. The origin of this loyalty dates back to the Kamakura period, between the years 1185 and 1333, when the Japanese feudal system began to solidify. At that time, samurai were not merely hired soldiers, they were permanent vassals of a feudal lord called a daimyo. The relationship between the samurai and his daimyo was sealed through an oath called chigiri, which was not simply a verbal agreement or a signed document. It was a sacred pact that transcended life and death, a bond believed to be recorded by the gods themselves. When a young samurai swore this oath, he was not only promising to serve his lord in battle, he was promising that every beat of his heart, every thought of his mind, and every action of his body would belong to the daimyo until his last breath. And here is the most disturbing detail. This oath did not end with the samurai's death. It extended to his children, his grandchildren, and all future generations of the family. The bushido code, which literally means the way of the warrior, was the framework that organized and systematized these rules of loyalty. But contrary to popular belief, bushido wasn't written in a single book or created by a single person. It was a set of principles that evolved over centuries, transmitted orally from master to disciple, from father to son, until they were finally recorded in texts such as the famous Hagakure, written by the samurai Yamamoto Tsunetomo in the early 18th century. In the Hagakure, there is a phrase that summarizes the entire essence of samurai loyalty and is shocking in its brutal simplicity. Tsunetomo wrote that the samurai's path is found in death, and that when a samurai is confronted with the choice between life and death, he must choose death immediately, without hesitation. This was not a poetic metaphor or an abstract philosophical exercise. It was a literal instruction on how a samurai should live each moment of his existence. But how did this loyalty manifest itself in practice, in the daily lives of these warriors? The answer is both fascinating and terrifying. A samurai awoke every morning with the awareness that this could be the day his lord would demand his ultimate sacrifice. He could not refuse an order, no matter how impossible, dangerous, or morally questionable it might be. There are historical records of samurai who received orders to carry out suicide missions, knowing perfectly well that there was no chance of survival, and they accepted them with gratitude, thanking their lord for the opportunity to prove their loyalty. In 1560, during the Sengoku period, a daimyo named Takeda Shingen ordered 300 of his samurai to defend a bridge against an army of 5,000 enemy soldiers. All 300 men knew they would die. There was no military strategy that could save them. And yet, each of them marched to that bridge, fought to their last drop of blood, and none even thought of retreating. When historians studied this event, they were impressed not by the physical courage of these men, but by the fact that none of them questioned the order. None of them tried to negotiate. None of them showed the slightest sign of hesitation. And you? Can you imagine living with that level of absolute commitment to another person? Leave your opinion in the comments about what you would do in that situation. Samurai loyalty wasn't limited to the battlefield. It permeated every aspect of daily life in ways that are difficult for the modern mind to comprehend. A samurai couldn't choose where to live, whom to marry, what career to pursue, or even what clothes to wear without his lord's approval. Historical records show instances of samurai being ordered to marry specific women to strengthen the clan's political alliances, and they obeyed even if they were already deeply in love with others. In some extreme cases, samurai were ordered to divorce their wives and abandon their children to follow their lord to a new province, and they did so without hesitation. The concept of personal desires, individual dreams, or personal happiness simply didn't exist in the vocabulary of a true samurai. The only happiness he should seek was the satisfaction of his lord. But the most shocking aspect of this loyalty was the practice of junshi, also known as oibara, or death following. When a daimyo died, it was not uncommon for his most loyal samurai to commit seppuku, the ritual suicide by disembowelment, to accompany their lord in death. This was not an order, but a voluntary choice motivated by the belief that a truly loyal samurai could not continue living after his life's purpose, serving his lord, had ended. During the funeral of Shogun Tokugawa Iemitsu in 1651, 13 of his closest samurai committed junshi on the same day. They gathered at a temple, donned their finest ceremonial robes, wrote farewell poems, and then, one by one, performed the ritual of seppuku. The scene was described by witnesses as simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, as each samurai maintained a serene and dignified expression while opening his own abdomen with a small dagger called a tanto. This type of devotion was considered the pinnacle of loyalty, and the families of these samurai were honored for generations. But not everyone agreed with this extreme practice. The Tokugawa shogunate itself, which ruled Japan from 1603 to 1867, began to question whether junshi was not an unnecessary waste of valuable warriors. In 1663, the Tokugawa shogun Ieyatsuna officially banned the practice of junshi, declaring it a selfish act that deprived the clan of skilled warriors who could serve the next lord. However, the ban had limited effect because many samurai continued to practice junshi in secret, seeing the prohibition as inappropriate interference in a matter of personal honor. The law had to be enforced several times over the following decades, and even then, instances of junshi continued to occur sporadically until the end of the Edo period. The story that best exemplifies the absolute power of samurai loyalty is undoubtedly the revenge of the 47 Ronin, a real event that occurred between 1701 and 1703 and became Japan's most famous legend. It all began when a young daimyo named Asano Naganori was provoked and insulted by a court official of the shogun named Kira Yoshinaka. Unable to control his anger, Asano drew his sword and attacked Kira inside Edo Castle, an act that was strictly forbidden. As punishment, Asano was ordered to commit seppuku, which he did with dignity. His samurai, 470 men, automatically became ronin, masterless samurai. Most of these ronin dispersed and sought new lords or abandoned the samurai life altogether. But 47 of them, led by Oishi Yoshio, made a secret oath to avenge their master's death by killing Kira. The plan these 47 men executed was a masterpiece of patience, strategy, and sacrifice. They knew Kira would be expecting immediate revenge, so they decided to wait. Oishi, the group's leader, began living as a dissolute drunkard, frequenting brothels and gambling dens, earning a reputation as a weak and pathetic samurai who had abandoned all principles of honor. This was a carefully constructed facade to make Kira and his spies believe the Ronin no longer posed a threat. Oishi even divorced his beloved wife and sent his children away, all to maintain the charade. For almost 2 years, he maintained this persona, suffering public mockery and scorn, all while secretly planning every detail of the attack. On the night of December 14, 1702, during a heavy snowstorm, the 47 Ronin finally attacked Kira's mansion. They overwhelmed the guards, stormed the residence, and found Kira hiding in a coal depot. Oishi offered Kira the chance to die honorably by committing seppuku, but Kira refused, so the Ronin decapitated him and took his head to Asano's grave, where they placed it as an offering. What happened next is what makes this story truly extraordinary. The 47 Ronin knew from the start that their revenge would result in their own deaths. The shogun's law was clear. Private vengeance was forbidden. They could have fled, tried to hide, or sought clemency, but instead, they calmly marched to the nearest authority and surrendered. During the ensuing trial, there was intense debate among the shogun's officials. On one hand, the ronin had clearly violated the law. On the other hand, they had demonstrated the purest form of samurai loyalty, fulfilling their duty to their deceased master. The people of Edo saw them as heroes, and there was massive public pressure to pardon them. In the end, the shogun decided that the ronin should die, but in recognition of their exemplary loyalty, they would have the honor of committing seppuku instead of being executed as common criminals. On February 4, 1703, all 47 ronin committed seppuku on the same day, in the same place, maintaining their composure and dignity until the end. They were buried together next to their master at Sengakuji Temple in Tokyo, where thousands of people still visit their graves to pay homage. This story of the 47 ronin reveals a profound truth about samurai loyalty. It wasn't based on reward or personal gain. These men gained nothing from their vengeance except the satisfaction of having fulfilled their duty. They sacrificed years of their lives, their families, their reputations, and ultimately their own lives, all out of loyalty to a lord who was already dead. This completely defies the modern logic of cost and benefit, of rational self-interest. For the samurai, loyalty was an end in itself, not a means to achieve something more. It was the very essence of their identity and purpose. But it's important to understand that this loyalty also had a dark and problematic side. It created a social structure where individuality was completely suppressed, where questioning orders was unthinkable, even when those orders were clearly unjust or cruel. There were documented cases of daimyos abusing this absolute loyalty, ordering their samurai to commit terrible acts simply to test their obedience. In 1570, a notoriously cruel daimyo ordered one of his most loyal samurai to kill his own wife, just to prove his loyalty. The samurai obeyed, killed his pregnant wife, and presented her head to his lord as proof. When the daimyo revealed that it was just a test, and that the samurai had passed, there was no celebration, only a somber silence. The samurai never psychologically recovered from what he had done, but he also never questioned the order, because for him, loyalty was above all else, even love. This mentality only began to change at the end of the 19th century, when Japan underwent rapid modernization during the Meiji era. The feudal system was abolished, the daimyos lost their power, and the samurai were officially dissolved as a social class in 1876. Suddenly, thousands of men who had dedicated their entire lives to the service of a lord found themselves without purpose. Many former samurai had extreme difficulty adapting to the new world, where personal loyalty was replaced by loyalty to abstract institutions such as the state or corporations. Some became policemen or soldiers in the new imperial army, transferring their loyalty from the daimyo to the emperor. Others failed to make this transition and lived the rest of their lives as ghosts of a bygone era, trapped in a code that no longer had a place in the modern world. If you enjoyed discovering how absolute loyalty controlled every aspect of samurai life and created some of the most impressive stories in Japanese history, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more fascinating facts about the world of the samurai and ancient Japanese culture.